The morning sun crept over the city skyline, painting the diner windows of soft gold. Inside Rose's cafe the air hummed with quiet conversation and the comforting clatter of plates. Olivia, a bright and attentive waitress, weaved between tables with a practiced grace that made her job look effortless. Her gentle smile and warm greetings had a way of making even the grumpiest customers feel welcome. But beneath the surface, Olivia carried her own worries. Rent was overdue and her boss, Miss S. Harrington, had been on edge all month about sluggish sales. Despite her financial concerns, Olivia had a habit of taking care of others before herself. She'd cover a co-worker's shift if they were sick or offer a sympathetic ear to lonely regulars who just needed someone to listen. That day started like any other. The hiss of the coffee machine, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, and the steady hum of the diner's fluorescent lights. Yet something was about to happen that would change Olivia's life, though she couldn't have guessed at the time. As the breakfast rush wound down, Olivia noticed something outside the big glass window. A small thin puppy curled up by the dumpster in the alley beside the diner. It looked shivering, dirty and malnourished. Her heart pinched with concern. Stray animals weren't uncommon in the city, but something about this puppy, with its huge fearful eyes, pulled at her deeply. Before she could stop herself, Olivia grabbed a small bowl from behind the counter and ladled in a bit of leftover soup. She cut up a few slices of ham and toasted some bread, carefully placing it all on a tray. Stealing a quick glance at the front booth where Mr. Harrington was reading the newspaper, Olivia slipped outside to check on the frightened pup. In that moment she had no idea how a single compassionate act could incite so much turmoil, or how quickly circumstances could spiral out of control. Nor could she have predicted the person who would appear just 30 minutes later, turning her life upside down in the best way possible. A crisp autumn breeze greeted Olivia as she stepped into the narrow alley. The puppy cowered against the dumpster, bones visible beneath matted fur, its ears flattened at her approach. Uncertain whether she posed a threat, Olivia crouched low, careful not to loom over the shivering little dog. Slowly she pushed the bowl of soup and bread closer. "It's okay, buddy," she murmured softly. "I won't hurt you." The pup sniffed the air, trembling. The smell of the warm broth eventually overpowered its fear, and it inched forward to take a few tentative laps. Olivia smiled, relieved that it accepted her offering. She saw a torn piece of rope around its neck, evidence it might have been abandoned or lost. A wave of sadness washed over her. She'd grown up with dogs. Her father had once told her, "Animals sense our intentions." And that stuck with her ever since. The puppy seemed to sense Olivia's kindness now, shoulders relaxing slightly. Its tail gave a timid wag just once. A muffled clatter from inside the diner reminded her she couldn't stay outside for long. Wiping her hands on her apron, Olivia stood. "I'll check on you again soon, little one," she promised before heading back in. She glanced around. She couldn't just leave the pup out here in the cold alley all day. Perhaps she could make a phone call to a shelter or rescue after her shift. Returning to the kitchen, Olivia carried the empty tray to the sink. Her coworker Mario raised an eyebrow. "What were you doing out there?" She hesitated a beat. "Just saw a stray puppy," she admitted quietly. "Gave it some soup." Mario's eyes flicked to the front booth where Mr. Harrington was still reading. He understood. "Just be careful," he whispered. "You know how the boss feels about handouts." The lunch crowd began to trickle in. Olivia worked quickly, balancing plates of grilled sandwiches and steaming bowls of chili, but she couldn't stop worrying about the puppy. As the diner filled, Mr. Harrington paced the floor, monitoring every detail like a hawk. He disliked anything that might cut into profits or slow down table turnover. When the rush subsided, Olivia slipped back outside to check on the puppy. She found it huddled closer to the door, apparently trusting her enough to stay near. Though it had eaten, it still looked frightened. Olivia placed a soft cloth on the ground, hoping to offer some warmth. "You hang in there, okay?" she murmured. Suddenly the back door of the diner banged open. Mr. Harrington stepped out with a stack of trash. He froze at the sight of Olivia kneeling beside the stray. His expression hardened. "What on earth are you doing, Olivia?" he demanded. Voice brimming with irritation, she rose slowly, trying to sound casual. I just gave the little pup something to eat. It's starving." Mr. Harrington's nostrils flared. "You used my supplies to feed a mangy stray dog," he spat, tossing the garbage bag aside. "In case you forgot, this is a business, not a pet charity." Olivia's cheeks flushed. "I only used Leftover soup and it's freezing out, look at it, it's just a puppy, it won't make it. On the streets he cut her off with a scowl, we can't afford to be handing out free meals, especially not to some filthy animal. Don't you realize customers might see this, they'll be disgusted or think we're unsanitary. Glancing behind him, Olivia saw Mario peering through the back doorway, concern etched on his face. She swallowed hard, forcing a calm tone. People like to see kindness, Mr. Harrington, they respect it. It's not like I'm letting the dog roam the kitchen. The boss's eyes narrowed. I've had enough, go back inside and get to work, and don't touch that dog again. If I see you messing around out here you'll be out of a job, understood? Her stomach twisted. She needed this job desperately. With trembling hands she nodded and walked back in, the puppy staring after her, tail tucked as if sensing her distress. All afternoon Olivia wrestled with guilt. Every time she peered out the window she saw the forlorn pup in the alley. She tried focusing on her duties, refilling drinks, checking on customers, but her mind kept drifting. Mario gave her a sympathetic pat on the shoulder, but there was little he could do without jeopardizing his own job. Finally, near the end of her shift, Olivia reached a quiet moment. She approached Mr. Harrington, who was finalizing the daily sales on a clipboard. Summoning all her courage she said, "Sir, I know how you feel about this, but that puppy could die out there. I can't just ignore it. If it's a problem that I used a little leftover soup, I'll pay for it for my tips." He looked up coldly. "You just don't get it, do you? Our image is on the line. We don't need a stray mutt lurking around scaring off decent customers." He flicked his pen shut. "One more word and you'll regret it." A knot of anger and sorrow formed in her chest. She wanted to scream at the injustice of it all, that a harmless pup could be seen as a threat, yet Mr. Harrington refused to budge. What she couldn't know was that a single event just half an hour later would turn this diner and Olivia's life upside down. Olivia's shift ended in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical motions. She couldn't concentrate on small talk with customers, nor on the daily chores of restocking napkins and wiping counters. Her gaze kept returning to the alley where the puppy dozed fitfully on the cloth she'd laid out. Despite Mr. Harrington's warnings, Olivia prepared a small parcel with bits of cooked chicken and half a roll. With a racing heartbeat she quietly slipped out the back door. The pup's ears perked up at her approach. Its tail gave a nervous wag. Uncertain but hopeful she knelt to place the food in front of it. "You poor baby," she whispered, stroking its head gently. The pup licked her fingers and Olivia smiled. "Don't worry, we'll figure something out." She was about to offer water when the voice behind her shattered the moment. "Olivia, didn't I warn you?" roared Mr. Harrington. He stood in the doorway, arms folded, face grim. Her stomach plummeted. I'm off the clock. This shouldn't off the clock or not," he snapped. "You're still on my property and I already told you to leave that thing alone." He marched forward, pointing a finger in her face. "I don't tolerate disobedience, especially when it comes to my rules about strays. You're fired." Silence fell like a weight between them. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "Fired," she stammered. "But Mr. Harrington, I need this job, my rent, my—" He cut her off with a dismissive wave. "I don't care about your rent. You broke the rules and you embarrassed me in front of staff. Pack up. I won't have a waitress who can't follow simple instructions." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but Olivia refused to let them fall. She stood up, squared her shoulders and met his glare. "Kindness is not embarrassing. I'm sorry if that offends you, but feeding a starving puppy is the decent thing to do." She carefully scooped the puppy into her arms, trembling with anger. "If that means losing my job, so be it." Mr. Harrington's lip curled. "Get off my property," he muttered, "and don't you dare step foot in my diner again." Olivia turned on her heel. Tears finally blurred her vision as she carried the pup around to the front. Retrieving her personal bag from an employee locker, Mario hurried after, her eyes wide. "Live? Oh my God, I'm so sorry," he whispered. She managed a weak smile through watery eyes. "Thanks, Mario, it's not your fault." Stepping outside into the late afternoon sun, she cradled the puppy, unsure where to go. The city bustled around her, cars honking, people rushing past. Oblivious to her predicament, she found an empty bench by a bus stop, set the puppy in her lap and tried to calm her spinning thoughts. Jobless, broke, a stray dog to care for and nowhere to take it. The pup nuzzled her hand as though sensing her sadness. "Guess it's just you and me now," she murmured, a wavering half smile on her lips. She fished out her Phoned to call a local shelter, but the wait times for intake were notoriously long. Then the battery died with a chirp. No more. Lifeline time ticked by. 30 minutes felt like an eternity. She wondered if she could find a friend to crash with, or if she might scrape enough money together to at least buy puppy food. Gently she gave the little dog some more water from a plastic cup. The pup lapped it up eagerly, tail wagging in a small show of thanks. Nearby a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Olivia paid it no mind until the door opened and someone stepped out, their footsteps moving toward her. "Excuse me, miss," came a warm, measured voice. She looked up to see a man in a neat blazer, mid-40s, with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority. A small pin on his lapel read Councilman Evans, or so her blurry vision interpreted. "I am sorry, is something wrong?" she asked hesitantly. He studied her tear-streaked cheeks, then the trembling puppy in her lap. "I couldn't help but notice you seem upset. Are you all right?" Olivia blinked in surprise. "I'm fine, I guess, just lost my job." She gave a bitter laugh. "Over feeding a stray puppy?" The man's brow furrowed. "Feeding a stray puppy cost you your job?" He glanced at the diner's neon sign. "That Diner Rose's Cafe?" She nodded. Too drained to say more, he frowned. "I was planning to meet someone there for a late lunch. Mind telling me what happened? Maybe I can help." Something about his sincerity made Olivia want to trust him. In halting sentences she explained how she'd given leftover soup to the puppy. Mr. Harrington's reaction and her subsequent firing. Councilman Evans listened attentively, jaw tightening with empathy. "That's unbelievable," he said softly. He turned, gesturing to his SUV. "Why don't we get the puppy checked at a nearby vet? I know a place that does discounted care for strays. We can talk on the way." Stunned, Olivia hardly knew how to respond. Was this real? A complete stranger offering help? She felt the puppy shift in her arms, letting out a tiny bark. Slowly Olivia stood. "Thank you," she murmured, heart pounding with a strange mix of hope and disbelief. Councilman Evans led her to the vehicle. It smelled of leather and faint cologne, a stark contrast to the chaos of her day. The puppy gave a little whimper, pressing into Olivia's chest. Settling into the passenger seat, she exhaled shakily, as if stepping into a new reality. Just 30 minutes ago she'd lost everything. Now the future, while still uncertain, suddenly felt less grim. She held the dog close, feeling its rapid heartbeat, and wondered what destiny had in store for both of them. 30 minutes had turned Olivia's life upside down as Councilman Evans guided his sleek black SUV through the midday traffic. She held the trembling puppy and tried to piece together what was happening. She'd lost her job moments before. Now a city official was driving her to a veterinarian's office. Her head spun with questions she was too overwhelmed to ask. The puppy rested in her lap, dozing. Its shallow breath signaled exhaustion, but at least it was calmer now. Olivia brushed away dried tears, focusing on the warm presence of this small creature. Though she was reeling from being fired, having the pup close made her feel that maybe, just maybe, she'd done the right thing. Councilman Evans kept glancing over, checking on her. "WEC be at Dr. Patel's clinic soon," he said. "I've worked with them on a citywide spay and neuter program. They're used to handling rescues. And they won't charge too much for a stray." "Thank you." Olivia managed a million thoughts danced in her mind. Her rent, her job, her bleak finances. Yet despite everything, a flicker of hope glowed inside her. Here was a person, a stranger, who showed her kindness much like she'd shown the puppy. So he continued gently, "Can I ask why you were fired for feeding this pup?" "That seems harsh," she sighed. "My boss, Mr. Harrington, hates anything that doesn't directly bring in money, and he especially despises strays. I guess he thought I was wasting resources." "That's disheartening," the councilman remarked, brow furrowing. "In my experience, good businesses value compassion." Olivia offered a faint shrug. "He didn't. So now I'm unemployed." Her voice caught. "I'm not sure what I'll do next, but I couldn't let the puppy starve." Councilman Evans nodded as though confirming her moral stance. "We need more people like you," he said softly. They pulled up to a small brick veterinary clinic with a sign reading Dr. Patel's Pet Care. The parking lot was half full. Evans parked near the entrance and hopped out to help Olivia. Inside, the reception area was bright and smelled of antiseptic. A friendly vet tech noticed the puppy immediately and ushered them into an exam room. Moments later, Dr. Patel, short, bespectacled with a kind smile, stepped "In what do we have here?" she asked, snapping on latex gloves. "A stray pup," Evans explained, "found near a diner, possibly malnourished, maybe dehydrated." Dr. Patel made a soft sing noise, carefully lifting the puppy from Olivia's arms. She gently checked the pup's gums, heartbeat, and reflexes. Olivia stood to one side, heart thumping. The clinic's overhead light revealed just how skinny and dirty the little dog was. "He's definitely underweight," Dr. Patel said, "but I don't see any major wounds, just a few scrapes. We'll need to run a quick test for parasites, give him a round of shots, and see if he can handle some special puppy food. Mind if I ask for your name and contact information?" Olivia hesitated. She'd never planned on adopting a dog. She had no job, no stable situation, but the puppy nuzzled her hand, whimpering softly. Councilman Evans gently touched her shoulder. "I can cover any immediate costs," he whispered, "and if you can't keep him, we'll find a rescue group." Touched by his generosity, Olivia managed a nod. "My name is Olivia Moore," she told Dr. Patel. "I'll take responsibility for him for now." Dr. Patel smiled. "We'll do what we can. Wait here while I run some tests." She carried the puppy away, leaving Olivia with the councilman in the exam room. Olivia felt a rush of gratitude. She tried to speak, but words failed and tears welled up. Again Evans offered a tissue. "Hey, it's okay," he murmured. "It might sound strange, but I'm glad I stopped by that diner. I was supposed to meet Mr. Harrington about some city permits, but I ended up seeing you instead." "What about your meeting?" she asked, wiping her eyes. He grimaced. "When I went in, Mr. Harrington was furious. He started ranting about a waitress who gave away food to a worthless stray." Evans shook his head. He raved on about how it ruined his image. "I realized this was the reason you got fired. That told me more about him than any meeting could." Olivia's cheeks flushed. "I guess my name came up." Evans nodded. "It did, and from the way he spoke about you, I knew you were a decent person forced into a cruel situation." A sparkle lit his eyes. "I make it a point to help good people, especially those who show kindness to the vulnerable." A lump formed in Olivia's throat. She'd never expected such support from someone with authority. "I thank you," she managed. "I'm not special, I just couldn't watch an innocent animal suffer." Before he could reply, Dr. Patel returned with the puppy cradled against her chest. "He's a tough little guy," she said with a smile. "No major health issues, just some malnutrition and minor infections. We can treat him easily with antibiotics and better food." Relief flooded Olivia. She let out a shaky breath. "That's wonderful." Evans patted her on the back. "You see, you saved him. If you hadn't intervened, who knows what could have happened." Dr. Patel offered a small bottle of antibiotic drops and explained the feeding instructions. She also gave them information for a low-cost spay-neuter clinic when the puppy was older, and a rescue organization that might assist with adoption if needed. Despite her uncertain future, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. She gently took the puppy, who gazed up at her with trusting eyes. "Thank you, Dr. Patel," she said. "I'll do my best." Evans pulled out his wallet. "Let me take care of the exam fee," he said, heading for the front desk. "We can sort out the rest later." Left alone for a moment, Olivia leaned against the wall, the puppy tucked against her shoulder. She couldn't help but think, "This morning I was just a waitress trying to make ends meet. Now I have no job, but I've met a helpful councilman and saved sod a life." The puppy let out a quiet yawn, and Olivia couldn't hold back a smile. Something felt like it was shifting in her life, a new chapter beginning, but she had no idea how big this shift would be, or how a single social media post would soon transform everything. After finishing at Dr. Patel's clinic, Councilman Evans insisted on dropping Olivia off at her tiny apartment. She tried to protest. "It's out of your way," she said, but he waved her concern aside. "I need to confirm you have a safe place for the pup," he teased gently. The ride there was quieter. The puppy, freshly bandaged and medicated, dozed in a small carrier Dr. Patel had lent them. Olivia too felt a wave of fatigue as the adrenaline subsided. Though her problems hadn't disappeared, it helped knowing someone cared enough to step in. When they arrived, Olivia's cheeks grew hot. The apartment building was old and run down, the kind of place you rent on a waitress's salary. Flickering hall lights and scuffed linoleum floors greeted them as they climbed the stairs. More than once she apologized for the mess, but Evans simply smiled politely. Outside her door she paused. "It's not much," she said, unlocking the worn-out lock, "but it's home." They stepped into a cramped studio. Hardly bigger than Dr. Patel's exam room, a small couch doubled as her bed. A single window looked out onto a brick wall, and the kitchenette was barely big enough to hold a mini fridge and a hot plate. Embarrassed Olivia sat down the puppy carrier near a half-folded blanket. Evans surveyed the place thoughtfully. It's cozy, he said diplomatically. Then he caught sight of an eviction notice half tucked under a stack of mail on the counter. He frowned but didn't comment. Let's get the pup settled, he added, changing the subject. She carefully placed the puppy on the folded blanket and he stirred, sniffing the air. She realized she had no dog food. Just leftover instant ramen and a couple sli of bread for herself. I'll need to pick up some dog supplies, she muttered. Collar, leash, maybe some actual dog chow. Evans patted his pockets, pulling out a business card. Here, my direct line if you need help, vet bills, food, a place that might foster him. Call me, I can connect you with city resources or a rescue group. Her eyes widened. Are you sure? You've done so much already, he shrugged. When the city council asked me to hand community outreach, I decided to help.